and girls.
Boys and girls. Do not exhale. Thank you so much for coming to Manitou Waters. There are prizes tonight. Does that anybody recognize this stuff? Oh, you got to travel in America more often. There are prizes tonight. Not only intellectual prizes, not only mercurial material prizes. Those who understand the work of these two, if they answer the questions correctly, they get these prizes, you see. But guess who's going to be asked the questions? The authors themselves. Oh, no, just joking. Welcome to Manitou Waters. It is a joy to have you here. Manitou Waters, conceptually, is a healing arts center. What we have here is a naturopathic clinic, but also a number of other activities which are about healing, such as fiber arts, such as literary arts, such as music. Tonight, we're joyful about having two remarkable women who are writers contributing to the literature of our province and our country. Now, these are interesting women, I must tell you. And I've got the dirt on them both. And for the right amount of cash, I can be persuaded not to release that dirt.
Where's the joy in that?
Oh, that's Tracy. She's such a mischief maker, our Tracy Hammond. I want to tell you about each of the women in particular, but before that, I want to talk about literature for a moment. One of my favorite writers, and Dr. David Carpenter, who's here, was my professor 50 years ago, right there, long time ago. In those days, I was impassioned by the work of D.H. Lawrence. And one of David Carpenter's colleagues, a fellow named Chris Drummond, loved D.H. Lawrence. And so I became impassioned with his work. Now, I reread some Lawrence recently, and it doesn't grab me quite the same way. And that likely is because of something Lawrence himself said, which is that the novel, and the novel supremely, can teach you how to live. Poetry can do it even better, Dr. Drummond would say. We have here poet, novelist combination in these women whose work is very valuable and important for you to have a look at. And tonight we're celebrating, of course, the launch of a remarkable book. Now that book is The Apothecary's Garden. Now I've been reading that book, but I've also been reading around in some of her other work, like this one, The Small Things That End the World. And also this book, which is fascinating, and I didn't read it until recently, called Red Curls. Now, if you take a look at Tracy, you'd say, is there any connection between this book and Tracy? And the answer is, I think so. As you read these remarkable works of art, you get it that what D.H. Lawrence said, that the novel and or literature supremely can teach you how to live, is worth paying attention to. Now, in graduate school, and Dr. Carpenter will say, David will say, I try to let go of that earlier era when I was a professor, remember? I want to get the English professor out of me and the writer into the world. The beauty of literature is that it captures experience, phenomenological experience, spiritual experience, and so on, emotional experience, and shares it with you. It pulls those least common denominator of ideas and notions and images and shares them with you. And that's the beauty of these writers. Okay, we're going to begin with Tracy Hammond. She's what they call in the music business a warm-up act. So she's got to be good to get you all excited for the main act. But Tracy Hammond is, in her own right, a main act. I've got lots of notes about her. For example, when she was 15, where do people get the idea of becoming writers? Like, you want to do that? It's painful. Margaret Atwood, who was also Peggy, you remember when she was called Peggy Atwood, David?
Yes.
At the University of Alberta, and she was doing that graduate seminar and playing footsie with, what's that guy's name? I can't remember his name. He's a famous poet. No, it wasn't Al Purdy. It was another fellow. They were smitten with each other, and Margaret Atwood had just broken up with her husband, Peter Atwood. Anyway, she was free, and that's legitimate that she can play footsie. But one day, I was in a graduate seminar, and I dropped my pen, and I reached under the table, and I saw her leg nuzzling his calf. And when I came up on the other side of the table, she knew I had seen this, and I knew I had an A. So I said to her, Dr. Atwood, well, actually, she never did finish her PhD, did she? No. I said, Professor Atwood, what's it worth to you? Lots of stories like that do not make for bestsellers. What happened when you were 15 that was significant?
What happened?
Yes.
When I was 15?
15, yeah.
I don't remember now. What happened when I was 15?
What would you rather do at 15?
I was writing for the Western Producer when I was 15.
See that? She was in class, in algebra class, writing stories.
Yes. Where did you
Not doing the least common denominator,
Yeah.
algebraic functions. That's what Tracy was doing.
And I
You
still
know you have a
them.
writer.
Yeah.
Now, something else you were doing in high school.
And
What
they
was that?
stole them from me. There
They
were all
did.
these stories, and I don't have a single story anymore. Yeah.
She hasn't learned that you got to keep it all close and turn it into books. So if you're at 15 writing stories about your classmates in algebra class, you know something's going on. Tracy has done many, many things. She's a consummate volunteer. She's been involved in writing groups and initiatives for a long time. In fact, you started the Vertigo reading series, didn't you? You'll find as you check into her biography that writing is burrowed and embedded in who she is and who she's becoming. So you'll enjoy her poems. Now, I have a favorite of her poems. I just want to point it out, and then I'm going to be quiet. And it's typical of her to understate. Just a second, where is it here? Oh yes, here it is. Mortal myths of men. Now, I'm a man, right? A man. What old men argue about today are the shadows of what shrink us to the core. The stone of ourselves turned away, each resentful heart caught in the act of looking back. You read stuff like that and you know you've got to meet this woman. So join me in meeting Tracy Hammond. She's going to read for us for 21 minutes.
But am I a yellow cat or a green cat?
We're watching to see which balloon she chooses because that's part of the contest.
No pressure.
She chose the green balloon.
I chose
Don't
the green
remember
one
that.
only because I think more people can see on the green cat.
Now, can you hear her? Whoops.
Watch the yellow cat.
You gotta almost chew on
You
that.
gotta chew on it.
Everybody
Can you
hear her?
me now?
Good?
All right.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Susanna, for this lovely spread, and thank you for hosting us. And thanks to Jack and the Well Festival, and thank you to all of you guys for coming out. This is awesome. Thanks to Jeanette for having a new book and for inviting me to read. And yeah, so I'm just gonna kind of read a few poems. It's not gonna be very long, but I kind of, oops, see, this is not very good. I talk with my hands, so we're in trouble. So I was thinking the other day about, I'm just preparing a manuscript to send it off, and I've been 4 years preparing this manuscript to send it off, and I don't know what I'm hesitating about sending it to a publisher, but I'm in no rush. It's like, I've had 3 books, what the heck, no rush for a 4th. But I was thinking that I'm not the kind of writer that likes to write the same book all the time. And there are certain poets that you read where the themes are the same, the books are the same, and I think, I'm not one of those writers, but my 3rd book came about from a poem in my 2nd book, and my 4th book comes from a part of my life that I wrote about in my 1st book. So maybe I am that poet that just keeps writing about the same themes over and over. But my 4th book of poems is about, for those of you who know me, I was a hairstylist for 25 years, and I was actually a barber, so I cut men's hair predominantly. And so my fourth book deals with hairstyling, hair cutting, personal poems, Samson and Delilah poems. It deals with women, how we look at women and how the, biblical women, stuff like that. So I'm gonna kind of read you some of the poems from my fourth manuscript. I'm gonna start with the poem from my first book, which is called This Is Not Eden. So, oh, he took the chairs. Oh, yeah, hold on. Oh, no, something else. It's okay. So, this one, this was the first poem I sort of wrote about my barbering experience. But I do have to take my glasses off, which means you're all blurry now. So it's called Belly Button Words. Belly button words. I carried my belly, a pelican stomaching a fish, for 9 months. Skin taut like a rubber band around a jar. Working every day. Standing. They'd always ask, "So, what are you hoping for?" I heard them. I told them. "Puppies. Maybe a small litter." "Oh," they'd say, "go on." "Less fuss," I'd say. "Go on. None of that teenage stuff." They'd snort their disgust. I returned to school, university, milking words and babies, textbook mother. They'd always ask, "So what are you taking?" They fish. English. What? English major. "What do you want to do? Teach?" I hear them, belly button words. "What are you going to do with that?" "Why do I have to do anything with it?" Thoughts fly, flying fish. "So why are you going to school?" They hope for a catch, never catching on. "Maybe I want to write." I give them a nibble. "What are you going to write about?" "You," I say. "Oh," they say, "go on." So, a couple of years ago, I took a course with Phil Hall. It was this H. Hill Poetry Colloquium where I was working on this same manuscript. And I had met Robert Croach a couple of times I always say this one time at writing camp, I met Bob Croach, And anyway, so the whole theme of this H. Hill was about Robert Croach and learning. We went in depth into Bob Croach, and so I don't know. Somehow Bob Croach crept into my hair poem. So here's this is a poem for Bob Croach. So it's called Field Notes. To a longness, a long, no practice, longing. He did right. A sentence with rights, a right, rites of ritual. Right. This falling, a fall. Voracious. Around, come back, let it go. Though here and there, hair is up and down. A pin in the head is worth 2 in the bush. Head in the hand, a pen. Dear Robert, this stone is sharp, cuts the selvage. Savage styling is harder, hardly. Keep an eye on the object, the do, the means of doing, the cut, the style, the fashion. Bob and I search for signs. Bushes burn. What is it heroes want? Nothing but vanity, balanced pencil on my skull. The story gloried. Our fairies completed. Not included in this moment are my feelings about capturing my looks. My brush strokes, quiet games, scissors open on the pillow. So I had it like into sections because Phil Hall said put it into sections, but I think the sections were driving me nuts. So when Jeanette and I went on a writing retreat recently, I've taken it all apart. So what you're getting basically is some of my more personal stories, and then I'll end with the one poem that kind of started off again on the Samson and Delilah stuff. But this one's called Monsters. The service rote of hair over fingers, shears over comb, snipping, an umbrella of hands and bangs that collapse and cascade, fragile cheeks glued with tips washed, then conditioned. Another client's hair ready for rollers and heat. I'm braced for stories of distant grandchildren, her spouse's recent death. My client's voice floats from our reflection of ill-assorted parts. For a time, she and I are joined as one. Deformity, a product of skill, and metal's cold chatter against the hydra-headed world of anxiety. The multitude. Hourly rounds, losses forever linked by our new likeness. And watching these creatures, I wonder, what kind of a monster am I? A descendant of time made freakish by birth, or divine as ancient fiends once doomed for disaster? It's the artists that keep them alive, carved in woodcuts or painted into stories. Cleopatra before Antony, snakes wound round wrists until she too will be compared with another creature. Medusa and the shield of lethal beauty. Fear held before us like a gift, one lopped head maintained as a solution, society's alarm worn as weaponry. I smooth the last section in place, undo Velcro from her neck. With a sword-like swish, my client's cape is removed from her shoulders and chest. She shifts in my chair, smiles without looking at her reflection. There's sadness in her resignation and loneliness. A noticeable unease enters her eyes as she turns from the mirror. It's kind of for, oh, thank you. I have kind of some of the hesitation of sort of the doctor-patient sort of thing where you don't want to write stories about the people that you've done, but there's a couple of that just sort of stand out. This one story was about a man who lost his wife, and he wanted me to cut his hair even though I wasn't his stylist. So, and it was very moving and touching, and it always just stuck with me. He didn't have enough money to pay, and then he ended up leaving his watch with me until he came back to pay, but he was wearing a 3-piece suit with like just to the nines because he'd lost his wife like 6 months ago. So it was just very moving, and so it was one of these things that you have to write down. So this one's called There Once Was a Red-Haired Girl. She was a barber. He was a man of a certain age wearing an expensive suit, black leather shoes buffed to shine, polished as silver, his shirt, soft blue cotton, tiny patterned paisley tie. He stepped forward as if from legend, once heroic jawline, slumped by time and mourning. His eyes carried defeat from finding his best clothes in the closet his wife had kept, free of dust and moths that devour woolen elbows and underarms. He wants her, the red-haired woman in the shop of men, to cut his hair. And when it's his turn, he lowers himself down, places fingers on the chair's arms as she turns him away from her and the mirror. The cape's nylon wall makes it easy for him to tell her his story. The comb's teeth sliding under the wounds, each word lightening him, suspending his wife mid-air amid electricity's soundtrack echo in the busy shop. His wet cheeks are neither performance nor catharsis, but a casualty of loss. She lingers on the last touches, letting others wait as she sweeps every hair from him. So I'll read 2 more, and this is basically what happens to your body after standing for 25 years. So this one's called Sketch of the Human Spine. Shoulders are the donkeys of hairstyling, suffer the weight, arms, hands, tools. They pass a quarter of a century creating what Kandinsky labels aspects of line, acute and obscure angles that eventually leave us half bent. What undoes me the condition of always doing for each other, attending to our well-being, crafting people pretty or handsome. I've honed physical perfection like an artist, the overlap of masterpieces and my body's easel loaded by canvas. All that standing, feet fixed on hard-tiled floor, knees and thighs bearing my torso as hands dipped and dropped, swallows snatching bugs. After 25 years, I retire from this position, my spine degenerating between the fifth and sixth vertebrae, and an ache in my hips so colorful, worlds open beyond red and blue. Even now, sleep can't deaden the grip of past grooming when pain clutches muscles, mule packs jabbing my neck's knotted nest. So I'm gonna finish with this one, which is the first sort of one that I started in the series, thinking that it was so different from all the other things that I'm writing when it's really not. So it's called Weimar, which is it's an art form which is I guess if you're familiar with woodcuts, it's the woodcuts. They would make woodcuts about women of ill repute, women from the Bible that were bad, and so Samson and Delilah kind of got thrown in there. There was other women, but so I've called this poem Weibermacht, and there's two sections to it, and they're two different paintings. One is by Rubens of Samson and Delilah, and the other one is by Rembrandt of Samson and Delilah. So this is my sort of take on what's happening in those paintings. So Weibermacht, Rubens. We're not supposed to question the arched fingers on his left hand on gold fabric, painted next to the red folds below her uncovered breasts. And his right hand cradles the lower portion of her belly, his head dreaming on this scene, as if he'd fallen asleep, imagining the child he'd always wanted. Somehow, we're led to overlook his first marriage, how he'd killed them all. But oh, the audience will say, it's different this time around because all that red from robe to hair reminds us that nothing she does can be trusted, makes us think she liked his touch. And what's not to like, being loved by a man who works with his hands, those calloused palms covering plains she'd only ever read of reaching. His persistence, night after night, wooed her, his force a burden that could crush her with one small touch, though it didn't. And what we don't see is the kernel, her shelled doubt thankful another's hand reaches over her shoulder to cut him of his power. It's the fingertips on his shoulder and the lines around her mouth that says, she's not certain she knows what she's done. But the muscle to alter the scene is slowly falling to the floor. And are we wrong to wonder if Rubens was right to blind an audience into imagining a different story? So this one is Rembrandt's painting, which I think probably Rembrandt's is one of the more famous ones, as is Rubens too. So Rembrandt. The couple next to an old dark tree, probably an oak, an eye, the opening on the bark, an eye plucked from its socket. It's night. Dreariness draws our attention away from the golden boy's back, his face buried in her blue-robed lap. Her nipples are not exposed, though the breast closest to her heart is missing a piece of white material. Two swords foretell the tale, even before we notice the woman's face. Lips parted. She's afraid and stares, not at Samson wrapped around her, not at his curling hair, not at the men marching up behind her, but at something that is about to happen. She is pointing, not to his head, but to a place in the distance, the way we all point to someone or to solutions beyond reach when we are guilty. We are made to think this because the light angles on the ground, and because Delilah's right foot is illuminated. It's perfect and bare, as if this is all we need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
I got a deal for you.
Okay.
We have in this town something called the Manitou Beach Poetry Trail. And there's a map, and it shows where all the poetry posts are. There's one outside this building, for example. Have a look at it. And each of the posts has a poem by a local writer. Helen Herr, for example, has been featured in Poetry Post 4 times since we began. Regional writers, provincial writers, national writers, and international writers. So anyone in this room who has a poem or a segment that's short, since it is, after all, something that people look at as they're walking, send it to us. You can pick up one of these brochures to find out where you send it. And here's my deal. I want you to send right away a poem that we're going to feature immediately in the next iteration of the Poetry Posts. Now you might say, Poetry Post plus $3 might get you a cup of coffee. But the truth is that those posts are being read more and more and more. We've had a number of people respond to say how lovely to walk in Wellington Park and to come across a post that has in it poems. Neat idea. So pick one of these brochures up and do contribute. Now, I want to get back to the cash here. Anyone been to America recently? So you know that that is. You're that rich, you have $100 bills from America?
No.
Because if you were that rich, I know a very fine fund that you could contribute to. Well, these aren't real. These are counterfeit. I got to tell you. Yeah, they're counterfeit. However, they're wonderful because they look so real. We lived in America long enough so that we missed Canadian money with its color and the fact that you could see through it. Each person who does something I'm going to ask you to do at the end of our next reader's presentation will get one of these. All right, where in my pocket are my notes about this remarkable woman? What did I do with those notes? I can't do it from memory. I'm over 50. What did I do? Did I put them here?
Those are my poems.
Oh, those are your
You
poems.
can read
What did I do
those.
with those? I had them earlier. Let's see, I got money, I've got business cards. There it is. It's over near the liquor cabinet. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Your editor was cleaning it up.
Yeah, I could see this. Jeanette Lines. It took me a while to get it right. L-Y-N-E-S. So that when you add something that belongs to Jeanette, it's S apostrophe. And that's a rule that all English professors know. Possessive first, then plural. No, it's the other way around. It's plural first, then possessive. And I think I messed up your name 4 or 5 times. She very politely said, this is something up with which I will not put. And no, I know you didn't. I'm just making another joke about gerundives. Jeanette and I intersect. We are kindred spirits in so many ways. For example, she's born in Southern Ontario. What town?
Hanover.
Hanover. I know where Hanover is, and I used to drink beer in the Hanover Hotel. I sold Quaker Oats in Palmerston and Hanover. So we are, and my brother lives in near Paisley. So that's part, we're linked in that geographic sense. We're also linked in the sense that we both have a background in formal training in English language and literature. We're also linked in another way. When you read the work of Jeanette Lyons, you know that her work isn't about form and function. It isn't some of the trendy stuff that happens when people who have an academic career try to write, because there are a lot of those around. She gets to the stuff of life. So this book that we're celebrating tonight, this one, is loaded with all kinds of insights into pretty important questions, such as, what is romantic love? I know I can't give away the plot, right?
Yeah.
What is romantic love? What is the nature of relationships? What is the nature of community? She writes about Belleville, Ontario, for heaven's sakes, in the Bay of Quinte. She writes about people 150 years ago. How do you take questions about life and try to imagine them in that kind of context? 150, 160 years ago, which means you have a certain kind of language. In addition to that, how do you capture that in characters? And Susanna and I are reading this now, and we're loving it. You must, in fact, give this a try. She's got 7,000 copies here. You can buy 80 or 90 each. And for everybody who buys a copy, I'm going to give you $100. Now you'll notice it says the World Universal Bank, and it has funny language in the bottom. Federal Reserve note of no value outside of, and then it tells you where. These are good luck pieces from the Chinese tradition. And these Chinese notes are very common, and they're gifts that go with birthdays and anniversaries and so on. And they print them up in yuan, or renminbi as they're called in China. And they also do it with all kinds of currencies from Southeast Asia and Europe. But they're meant as good luck charms. And what you got to do, you see, is if you buy a book, you get one of these, and then you get her to sign it. Then it's worth its weight in paper. It's worth its weight in gold. Jeanette did her PhD at York University. There we intersect, because I have a long history with York. I didn't go there, but I had many friends who did. And we had quite a deal with the place that I was at, with the Commons at York University, which was very prescient, very student-centered. She's got 2 novels and 7 books of poetry, last count. Is it 7? Does she sleep? Why are you doing this when you could be dancing or traveling? She won the Bliss Carman Poetry Prize. Now I submitted, I tried, but I didn't win it, but she won it. So I'm always interested in those who get the prize, and I think, what have they got that I don't got? She was also shortlisted for the Pat Lowther Memorial Award. Now those of you who are long-time poets and writers know who Pat Lowther is. You were what haven't you been shortlisted? This is a very substantial writer we have in our midst. Okay, there's the usual, she coordinates a program at the University of Saskatchewan in the MFA in writing. But it's more than that. In this room is a woman who she had never met, who was a graduate of that program, who came here to see her because she was so moved and touched by the tutelage, by the inspiration. That would be you. Raise your hand tall. There you are. Just delighted. So we have here a teacher, in the true sense of the word dokara, to teach. We have here a writer. We have here a woman who's trying to capture, in her character Lavender, the essence of emerging. Feminism isn't quite the right language. 150 years ago, she pulls it off. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, people interested in $100 bills, Jeanette Lyons.
Am I the green one or the yellow one?
That's a good question.
Maybe the green one.
Oh, geez, green is the color.
Tracy warmed up the green one for me, so well, gosh, thank you so much, David, and thank you all for coming. It's quite emotional for me. I haven't done any public readings, or I haven't even been with students in a room for 2.5 years. I'm seeing my friends and my colleagues, and it's been very tough for everybody. So to be here tonight, and the sun shone across the lake, so I'm kind of feel really blessed. So thank you all so much for coming, and David and Susanna, to make this place of beauty and healing is, this is my first time here. Honestly, I feel like I'm in a dream. I'm just this is can I have all this stuff? No, it's just an absolutely incredible place that you built here. It's it's just such an honor to be here. This is really kind of the launch of the novel, and thank you so much for hosting, and all of you for coming, and the WOW Festival, that Jack Walton, and there's music later. David Carpenter's reading again later, I believe, down at the Art Gallery. Is that
Right.
Is that right? And there's events tomorrow morning. I'm teaching a workshop tomorrow morning at 11 on writing. So this is a great, yes. And this is a great weekend to just be alive and love words and love music. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. We sort of spitballed and dreamed about it months ago, didn't we? And I said, oh, I'd love to go to Manitou Beach. Maybe we could do a book thing. And here we all are, and it's amazing. And Tracy Hammond is one of my oldest friends and one of my favorite poets. And I just don't know who else I'd rather. She's not my opening act. She is. What are you? She is my soulmate, and one of my favorite poets. And the poetry manuscript that she's now completing is a very, very excellent, fine book. So I think we're going to see that in print. I hope soon. Yes. So I won't blather on much, because Susanna has been cooking madly and preparing this beautiful feast for everybody. And I do want to give a special shout out though. Okay, Sue, I can't help it. There's a couple of my former grad students here, which means so much to me, Dee and Doreen. But I couldn't do much in the winter, so I thought I'd take some online writing courses. So I took a course out of Gotham Writers Workshop in New York City. And that was just great. I needed to shake myself out of the doldrums. So I took a humor writing course online. And there were, people from, Brooklyn and all these, places. And you could see the list. There's somebody else from Saskatchewan. Wow, what are the odds? And it was somebody from Prince Albert, and we sort of emailed a little bit. And she came tonight. This is Sue. Yeah, see? Now you're embarrassed, Sue. You're real. You're not just a Zoom little face. You're real. Wow.
You're famous.
No, but thanks so much for that too. These connections are super important. So this is The Apothecary's Garden is a Victorian love story. I struggle with all the sadness and sorrow and gloom in the world, and sometimes I just need to go to a happier place. So I did write an old-fashioned love story set in 1860 in Belleville, what was then called Province of Canada, not Ontario. It's basically, it's a love story about a stranger rides into town she's a psychic medium with an assistant, and he has quite a serious, his face was burned in an accident, so it's kind of got a very tragic, kind of disfigured face. And this main character, my heroine, sells flowers. She's scraping along in Belleville. She lives with an orphan boy in her house. She's a bit of a bungler, so I'm going to read the preface and then just a short scene. I think that's maybe all you need for the setup. Other than this is 1860 in Canada. So anyway, I'll just read the preface and another short scene. This is the preface. Not so many years ago, though before the Grand Trunk Railway, my mother, a gifted harpist, acclaimed far and wide along Lake Ontario's shores, gave outdoor concerts in the large garden behind our house on Pinnacle Street. So sweetly she played, the instrument's strings rippling like wind chimes, that villagers out for a stroll often found themselves drawn by harp song on a summer night and took the cobbled path to our garden where lanterns necklaced through the trees. There they listened, charmed by the impromptu recital amid the lush flower beds and pungent, spiced scents wafting forth from the bountiful patches of herbs and curative plants so useful in my father's apothecary work. Our garden those nights was a soothing balm. Father, too, enjoyed these concerts, ensconced on the bench near the large, mossy rock. I nestled beside him, both of us brimming with pride. My parents were prominent Belleville citizens, not quite parallel with the Corbys, Sweets, Moody's, Noseworthys, or Flints, but personages of note in their own right. Mother with her harp, and father as a respected apothecary. Sometimes their identities blurred in that mother's extensive knowledge of medicinal plants was an invaluable asset to our family's pharmaceutical business. Father was proud of her in this respect too, and never hesitated to give her credit. Indeed, people at times regarded my parents interchangeably as the apothecary. Mother kept copious notebooks on therapeutic flora, plant remedies, as well as wild nature's many barks, berries, fungi, seeds, rushes, and creeping vines, and instructions for compounding them. She also recorded some traditional cures relayed to her by a generous local lady with whom she was acquainted. Thankfully, my mother wrote all this down. Otherwise, her expertise in nature's cures, especially recipes to prepare them for dispensing, would have been lost when she was snatched from us by pneumonia, not cholera, in 1842. To this day, my mother's garden, now mine, is known for its superlative flowers and botanical medicines. Over time, talk of the consoling oasis on Pinnacle Street germinated like seed pods into broader fancies. People claim music can still be heard some nights issuing from the green bower behind our house. There is an otherworldly aspect to my garden, which is now also my main source of income. Stopping by my cart of floral wares at the train station, people regale me with their memories of my mother's musical prowess amid the blooming plants. My father rarely entered the garden after Mother died, so it was left in my care and became my joy and sustenance. I posted a sign on the gate, "Private garden, do not enter." Losing my mother when I was so young, then later, after my heartbreak in Coburg, I drew the garden's verdant sanctuary around myself like a shawl woven from blossoms and lemon balm. And after Father's sudden death just last year, at the brink of financial ruin on which it stranded me, I needed that floral refuge once more. Now my circumstances force me to cut the garden down, stem by stem, turning my refuge into coins for food on the table and other necessities. Around here, people like to say I can grow anything. Oh, that flower girl and her green fingers. I wish they'd leave off with girl. They've frozen me in time. I'm 28 now, and yes, skilled in garden craft, but if only I knew how to grow a life. I am broke and alone, except for the lame orphan boy who lives under my roof. A leaking roof, I might add. I'm so light, I drift like dandelion down, a condition caused by famishment. When I regard myself from the outside as through a stereoscope, what do I see? A woman, her morning skirt tarped loosely over her bones, pushing a cart along a road. So that was the preface, and I'll read a scene. It's not terribly long. There's lots of good wine to drink and food to eat and friends to see. Yes, our heroine Lavender. She's a little bit of a bungler, I guess, and she's quite smitten by these celebrities that have come into town. The psychic medium and her male assistant, Robert. She goes out and gathers herbs and things a lot in the woods. And on one of these excursions, there's a lot of crafts in the book, like making owls out of pine cones and like sewing and making crafts and stuff. So she's out, hunting down seeds and pine cones and things to make her craft to sell at the train station. And she took a tumble over a root, so her face is all bruised up so she's walking around the town, kind of getting preoccupied with the man Robert, who's the assistant of the famous celebrity psychic medium who's come into town. So she doesn't. This Lavender doesn't have very much money, but she decides that maybe she could eke out enough money to buy a gift for this newcomer in town, who she is quite smitten with. And Tracy and I were shopping today in Manitou Beach. We shop together lots of times. It's more like a treasure hunt. We don't buy that much, do we? No. We just sort of, I don't know, the thrill of the chase, right? So we were shopping today and had a nice time. So I thought, I'll read a shopping scene. What would it be like to go shopping in 1860 in Belleville, province of Canada? So it's just that, I'll read that scene. A new shop caught her attention. She maneuvered her steps around horse dung and reached the most verbose signage she'd ever seen. R.A. Beckett, bookseller and stationer, stationery, family and pocket Bibles, school books, music, melodeons, stereoscopes and views, periodicals, fine writing instruments. This seemed just the kind of place a bookish, worldly, philosophical type like Robert Trout might frequent. A bell chimed lightly as Lavender wedged her thin form into the shop. She didn't see Mr. Beckett. He kept a rope mat by his shop door. Lavender's boots carried some mud, left over, she supposed, from her recent sojourn into the woods. She stamped the clumped mud from them, thinking the sound would garner the bookseller's attention. She cast her eyes around the well-appointed shop. All manner of reading material, it seemed, sheet music, writing instruments, paintbrushes, easels, and other artistic paraphernalia. Still, she saw no one. "Down here," a skittering voice directed from behind a wooden counter. Lavender walked farther into the shop and peered over that same ledge. There stood a gnome of a man, bald, but for two tufts of graying hair, a visor clamped across his forehead, a head disproportionately large compared with the rest of his neatly dressed person. His suspenders had gold buttons. She heard someone playing violin badly, loudly, in a far room somewhere, practicing scales. "Are you Mr. Beckett?" Lavender asked, raising her voice to be heard above the violin's vinegar. The gnome tittered. "Is it Mr. Beckett you beckon?" "Yes," she answered. "I see you're well equipped in writing implements." "You see right, miss." "Fitch, Lavender." He sent up his twittery laugh once more. She wondered what about her name was so amusing. Mr. Beckett walked in a funny sideways gait across his shop to a display shelf that held pens, brushes, pencils. His walk reminded Lavender of a comedic bird she once saw that appeared drunk on the season's late fermented apples. The part bird, part gnome shop owner asked her exactly what she sought. "Pencils, sir." She wondered why she hadn't specified that in the first place. The tiny man embarked on his droll tilting gait back behind the counter, and just as Lavender puzzled how he could see above it to broker the transaction, he hopped, again in the manner of a bird, up onto a footstool that elevated him into a position of commerce. There was a terrible screech from the violin player in the far room. The instrument had paused mercifully for several moments prior to that. Mr. Beckett sent a high-pitched bellow back there. "Nancy, leave off! You'll drive the customers away." The wretched racket ceased. "Ha!" the bizarre little man exuded, looking ecstatic. "Pencils! I love pencils! Where would we be if they were never invented?" It took Lavender an instant to realize he awaited her answer. "I don't know," she said honestly. A dire expression for an instant palsied his face. "Lost is where we would be, utterly lost. I dare say the world could not turn. So not only do I have pencils, I sell only the very finest pencils. Ebenezer wood from America. Now look at this, will you?" Mr. Beckett opened the lid of a fancy wooden box as if revealing treasure in a chest. He removed in a lavish, loving gesture a pencil and, oddly enough, smelled it. "Ah," he said. "I know a superb pencil when I sniff one. But know this, miss, not all pencils are created equal. Far from it." She abided, hadn't foreseen the complexities of buying a pencil. He asked in a great many words what type of pencil she wanted. the kind of pencil you'd like to use, sir, if it was to be the very last pencil you owned in the world? Mr. Beckett shot forth a hacking laugh. Ask me something difficult, miss. Fitch, Lavender offered again. Thankfully, the violin remained mute. That requires no taxing of the mind, the shopkeeper said. Ebenezer wood. How many? A memory bird winged through Lavender's mind, needled her skull with its beak. Her tea purchase's imprudence must not be repeated. It had sparked the worry that she might have inherited her father's impulsive extravagance. Only 2 pencils, sir, wrapped in separate packages, if you please. She'd give one to Robert Trout, a gift of welcome to their village and further incentive to lobby Allegra for a private sitting. She'd save the other one for Arlo Snook at Christmas. The boy had lately acquired the habit of scribbling away at something at the kitchen table. He'd surely need a new pencil by December. Pique fireworked the bookseller's gnome face. He must have thought she'd purchased more than 2 Ebenezer pencils in the wake of his rhapsodic endorsement. Either that or the labor of 2 separate wrappings annoyed him. Are you sure you don't need more, Miss Fitch? You'll need a prime pencil to write a goodbye letter to the rogue who cracked your face open like that. He jabbed the pencil in the air towards Lavender's cheekbone. She laughed. No, rogue. I brought this injury on myself, falling down in the woods. It's healing quickly. I apply a compound of yarrow and aloe every day. Soon enough, Mr. Beckett resumed his miniaturized buoyancy. You do well to stay away from the woods. It's a perilous place. Then an abrupt topic pivot. Miss Fitch, do you know the derivation of the pencil? Its name, I mean? It seemed he must be indulged. Lavender shook her head. Mr. Beckett tilted up his visor cap so she might better see his earnest eyes, which, like his head, seemed too large for the rest of him. Pencillus, miss, he told her, Latin for little tail. And, his eyes sparked even brighter, a certain pointed part of the male anatomy I will refrain from naming in the presence of a lady, if you take my point. He wheezed blasts of mirth so intense, Lavender worried his little gnome heart might fail him right there in his shop. She felt herself blush. Mr. Beckett, can you assure me beyond a doubt that these pencils are guaranteed to be of the highest quality? He raised the box from which he'd taken them in a triumphant move, as though he defeated an army of inferior writing instruments. They are the finest, like I told you. If you need any more pencillus, Miss Fitch, you know where to beckon Mr. Beckett. He wrapped them up for her. Lavender placed the pencils in her basket with the flour and molasses. On the verge of her departure, Mr. Beckett launched into more pencil lore. Carbon and graphite and tree roots and a soldier of Napoleon's. He quite lost Lavender, whose nervous eyes flitted to the shop's wall clock. She was eager now to try her hand at one of the cookbook's recipes. Finally, she extricated herself. As the shop door's bell chimed behind her, the violin resumed its dissonant, mewling scales. Wait until she told Arlo Snook that she'd conducted commerce with the most flap-jawed gnome in Hastings County. What a character, Mr. Beckett. How he protracted the transaction. Both Trouts had eluded Lavender that day. Slippery fish, she thought. They came by their name, honestly. Well, thanks for listening so attentively. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost done, but there are tasks.
We also have food.
That's right. One of the tasks is to ingest all of that food and to have something to drink. But don't go anywhere for just a second. There are 2 other tasks. Over here is an exemplar of what I've been learning from reading. Don't forget, the novel and the novel supremely can teach you how to live. Lavender goes out and gathers things in the woods and in the forest, and she makes them into something else. Well, here at Manitou Waters, we have improvised many things. For example, Susanna's Balneotherapy Clinic is all recycled doors and windows and floors and materials. All kinds of things have been recycled here. So I recycled a bunch of things, and I made this book. Now, don't you be laughing, because I'm not as good at making stuff as Lavender, or my beautiful bride Susanna, who makes beautiful hats, as you can see over there, and embroiders and does lots of things. Well, I made this book. You see, isn't that lovely? It's all from recycled material, except this that I bought for $1. And this is a recycled bag. And what's up is, I want you to sign best wishes to our Jeanette on this special occasion. And I've got 2 pens here and even some magic marker pens. And if you sign, I'll give you $100. Is that a deal? But before you can sign, don't go away anybody, there's one other thing we need to do. This is the kind of moment that is precious to a writer like Jeanette. I have a feeling that this book is going to launch her into a very, I guess, special realm in Canadian writing. I think there's some more awards on the way. I think there's some more recognitions on the way. So this will become very precious, and you will be part of history, okay? Now, I'm going to put this thing over there by those Poetry Post pamphlets. But before we do that, we're going to gather comfortably, all in a big massy mess, with Jeanette and Tracy in the center. We're going to take a picture. Now, the person who's going to take the picture, are you able to do that, Gary? Is that easily done? Because he's got a fancy gizmo here that will gather a Panasonic kind of picture, and then we will have this available. Is everybody in? Yeah. Okay, so the first thing is we'll make the picture. While you're gathering together to do that, I will put this book on that table, and I will watch when you sign it, and I will give to whoever signs it $100 that you can not spend. I mean, you can try, but it won't get very... Well, wait a minute, you could probably try if you go to... Where could you spend this? I'm trying to think.
In jail?
Yes, in jail. Okay, everybody, so let's gather for a picture. Now, Gary, where would you like people to gather?
Doesn't matter.
Why don't we gather with everybody down there facing this way, and then Gary can just swing around and get a picture. So gather and smudge up like you're next of kin, okay? And really, really get together as affectionately as you can with Jeanette and Tracy right in the middle.
Down there?
Yep, down that way. Quit eating, get down there, we need the picture, let's go. Just kidding, just joking. You can have as much as you want.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Jeanette,
Thank you.
just go down that way. Go down that way. Gary will line you all up.
Well, doctor.
Do we need a row of chairs, maybe?
Yeah.
Or you can just sit down.
You want to see?
Maybe. Jeanette can sit on.
What do you think, Gary? Oh, they're working on it. Let me see what I can do there.
I'd like to get back.
I'd like to get back to this. Wait a second.
No, I'm good.
That's a good idea. Wonderful. There we go. The Royal.
At the Quinty Hotel.
Yeah. Here, I'll just... Perfect. See, all I really wanted was to create a space in there.
Nice and late.
Yeah. Yes.
Can't see past the post, can you? That's okay.
David, get a chainsaw, that post is in the way.
I know. That post, while Gary's organizing it, these posts weren't here when we came. And the ceiling was going like that. Right.
I think we're good.
We got it? Oh, let me see.
We're all fragile.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Famous
Give us a heads
moment.
up. We
So
need to
everybody-
smile.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
I want you to say, hip, hip, hooray, Jeanette. Hip, hip, hooray, Jeanette. Ready?
Hip, hip, hooray, Jeanette.
Oh, gee, come on, let's go. One more
Dave,
time.
Get in the picture.
Boy, I'm a coach. Ready?
Hip, hooray, Jeanette.
No, that doesn't work. One more time.
Hip, hooray, Jeanette.
Now we're going to say hip, hip, hooray, Jeanette and Tracy. You ready?
Yes.
Hip, hooray, Jeanette.
Follow my arm. Ready?
And Tracy.
Did you get that? Thanks, everybody. Now, if Jeanette, if you would kindly bring your magnificent book that I made you with all these wonderful found pieces, and please sign it. Please sign it for Jeanette. Look, don't wreck the joint, please. And then,
I will. Can I borrow your pen, David?
you betcha, come on over here. I got pens.
Oh, a pencil, yes.